like what will throw kids off. I don't know if I totally agree that I don't know if it's the verbiage around summary. I don't know if it's, when I think about where kids struggle with summary, oftentimes it's like, I mean, even if you say like, oh, let's recap what a summary is versus what it isn't. I think like a big distractor sometimes, in addition to just D, is like kids understanding like what is a small detail versus something that's actually representative of the text. And I think that is more worthwhile teaching.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree. Because some kids also chose C, which is exactly that like specific distractor. Yeah. I think that the reason I was thinking of it is because although we've explicitly retaught around objective and subjective, I know that I'm trying to think of like the best manifestation for a multiple choice park level question, which is this. Not only is it like general versus specific details that they have to like sort, but it always asks like which of the following details would best be added to an objective summary. And I don't know if they're like recognizing that summary should mean any opinion-based language automatically eliminates the multiple choice answer.
Yeah. A wondering I have is like, because summary is just like an important like skill that we as readers need anyway. Like, if kids were choosing D and C, what is like the kind of like reading comprehension gap that is connected to kids making those two having those two misconceptions?
I think with D is actually a summary of the text. I think it's the missing of the objective versus subject, because D actually is a summary. Right. And so for me, students who pick D, the reteach on that is a much smaller lift, because then it's just making sure we're recognizing subjective words within the text.
And those kids are understanding that it needs to be more of a general statement than too specific.
Yeah. Which students selected C?
Yeah, on the other hand, those that chose C, which is too specific.
I don't think very many.
No, I think it was all D, with the exception of Dayon and Amari. Right. So I think they're able to identify the summary. I think the big gap was in that objective versus subjective language.
Yeah, that's what it looks like in here, is that no one chose, like a couple people chose A and a couple people chose D, and those were both the ones that had subjective language.
Yeah.
And I think not even just multiple choice, it's also like in writing, kids will often tie in like their own opinion or own feelings. Like, what? It's not about you.
Right.
It's about like the text. So I think it's not just like tying in, it's not just about like tying in the right multiple choice, it's also like, where can you stamp or ask transferable questions that are going to get you insight into whether kids are being subjective or objective and how they understand the text.
That makes me think that the transferable question needs to be with their writing, like summarize, like what is a summary, or summarize this text versus analyze this text. Because I think like all we really focus on for the most part in writing is all analysis level, and there is always an element of like I'm trying to prove that this evidence, without saying I of course, but like prove that my claim is defensible with this evidence and this analysis piece, whereas like that's because like that is what is assessed on ANET and PARC, versus like the way that the standard comes out with objective summary is always a multiple choice. So I know that that's like, for example, why I haven't really emphasized as much in prep session like write an objective. We never say like write a summary of the text that you just read. Instead it's we're going to develop the central idea and then we're going to use that in order to answer a prompt that is analytical.
I also think though that we distinguish, and I don't know how much, and I'd love to hear everybody's thoughts. We distinguish summary and central idea as being like these two big, wildly different concepts. And personally, I feel like they're the same. They're roughly the same thing. What is this whole text about? I think there's some intricacies that go into a central idea that we should be referencing. Like we talked last week about like having some author's perspective or like the author's point of view within a central idea. But I still think that kids just need to be thinking, for me, especially with standardized testing, and just like in life, I think summary and central idea are basically interchangeable terms. And I think like kids, if we taught kids that could be something that they're immediately thinking. When I see summary, I'm just thinking, what's the central idea of this text?
That's what I'm wondering, is if we need to be using that language like explicitly with central idea that we use so much.
I think so. I think just telling kids that is basically what you're looking for within that.
Because Katie said you guys retaught objective versus subjective yesterday.
Very briefly, yeah.
What did that look like?
We reviewed it yesterday, but then
we
also explicitly retaught it on Monday.
But it wasn't a reteach on objective versus subjective.
That was Monday, I think, was the do now that we had with objective versus, it was like that one pager.
Oh yeah, last week we did.
And then we reviewed that yesterday more explicitly when we were reviewing these questions to focus on this question.
Yeah. But we retaught it on Monday. Was this the exit ticket from Monday?
No, this was retaught last Monday, not 4 days ago.
Okay.
We taught a week and a half ago when Melody was actually here. And then this is one of the we showed them something right after, which is an objective statement.
Mm-hmm.
But we haven't put the two together to be an objective summary. This is the
Yeah.
first time they've been introduced to this, which is kind of ramping up that skill a little bit.
Right.
Which is something we're going to continue to push over the next week.
Yeah, when I met with the review of the reteach yesterday, it was before we reviewed this question, I know Kevin explicitly was saying we need to define objective and subjective again, what are a couple of examples, and then now when we look at each answer, what are subjective words that we see that can eliminate that answer.
Within this question.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And for the most part, every kid was able to pick out worse, terrible, brutal,
Yeah.
and they got it. And I think it was just kind of like this, I wasn't looking for that subjective word. I saw summary, and I found what I thought to be the best summary.
Yeah.
Which D is a great summary, it's just not objective.
Yeah. I think you sent reflections on potentially looking at 7.5, but looking at the data, 77% of kids
Yeah.
who are proficient on that standard versus 23 for
Yeah.
the objective summary.
Yeah,
So I'm thinking we should stay focused on
That's fine.
this, and that'll be the focus of our reteach.
that's fine.
When does this come up again?
We can come up whenever we want.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
the good thing is kids always need to be thinking about what is the central idea of this text?
Right.
What is the author trying to tell me in this text?
Yeah.
In an objective way. So I wonder if something that would make sense is figure out what is the next lesson where you guys want to insert transferable questions related to this
Yeah.
to get kids to answer okay, what is the author saying in this section of the text?
Yeah.
In an objective way, figuring out what are the stamps you want to make along the way, what are the questions you can tie in.
And I think there's definitely stuff with what we read today in class and what they're reading for homework over the weekend in Unbroken that allows for that, a very quick reteach and a very quick reassessment on Monday
In focus lesson.
in focus lesson. And then I know that the assessment, the formative or the summative
assessment.
assessment on Tuesday would be a great chance to get some data back on how they did on that very quick turnaround.
Especially because I think that has.
That has both.
that
I'm
has-
looking
yeah,
at
that's-
it now, but I'm pretty sure it has. It definitely has 7-2 on
What
it.
we can also do is put the transferable questions for that Monday reteach in the prep session plans for Monday with the guide gen text.
That's the only problem with that is that's fiction.
Oh, it's the graphic.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the graphic novel.
The other option, if we wanted 2 at-bats, could be, because we had 2 informational texts this week, they were really meaty. We could just take one of those informational texts and have the same transferable questions review now that they've read it.
Yeah.
They can use their game plans, and if we wanted another data point prep session Monday before we do the guide gen text, Tuesday.
It should be a quick, even if it's with you can make it a quick, if it's with the text you guys already read, make it a quick do now where they write an objective summary statement, and
So
then
that'd
you
be-
pull 2 examples,
Yeah.
a strong one or a weak one, or just pick one to evaluate as a class,
Right.
and stamp what are the transferable
Yeah.
takeaways that you've been using with kids,
Mm-hmm.
and then debrief as a class how would we make this stronger,
Yeah.
or what makes it stronger.
I like that.
Would you
That
want
way
to
it's
do that
quick.
I'd
in
rather
each
do-
prep session, or would you want to come together?
No, I
Because
wanted to-
we had prep session before, which is nice. So if
But I think we could do it on chapter 25. Write an objective summary for chapter 25, which you read for homework, which is a great do now because we're reactivating what we just read over the weekend,
Yeah.
and then we can do it. And I think it's in 3 sentences, write an objective summary for what you read over the weekend. Because again, we're getting into the part of the book where he's getting tortured, we're just referencing the bird and how evil and awful the bird is. But we need to be taking that.
and make it objective.
Yeah, we need to be
Way
taking
to
that
write it.
that subjective language out of it.
So I hear you saying that reteach you want to be centered around sort of like a guided discourse. They're
Yes.
already reading. Everyone's gonna write their
Yep.
objective
Objective
summary,
summary.
Yep.
and then you're gonna pull an example and a non-example.
I'd like to do an example and a non-example. I'd like to see what the bar is and see where the gap is. And it may just be that I have one that's already written. We have a teacher one, and then we look at one and we determine where the gap is. That way we can codify what do we see in this one that makes it strong? Where do we see in this one that we can improve it? What does this already have? What can it be improved?
And we could, if we could take right from the class there, we also could just write a teacher exemplar and then a non-example teacher exemplar, and we do with everybody writes, discusses, revises, which worked really well as a protocol last week for us. we could have kids literally like revise their objective summary right
Yeah.
after seeing both.
I agree. I think either way. I think we have a back pocket one in case we need it.
Yeah.
But then I think because I think they're more invested when it's, we're gonna look at Bob's work. Bob, thank you so much for helping us. We're gonna make your work better today.
So it's like a write, discuss, revise.
Yes.
I wonder if.
And I think within the discussion, we give them some like some transferable steps of
Yes.
like, I do this, this, and this.
This
That's
is what
how I
makes
make
an
sure.
objective summary.
Perfect,
This is
yeah.
what an objective summary
Yeah.
must have, and I
Yeah.
think that's where potentially now maybe a good time to like hash out together. Like, let's plan. You guys figure out like what are the key things you want, like
In
an objective summary. Like good readers create an objective summary by asking themselves these questions. And like plan those together. That way you guys have like the bar going in, and you can
Yeah.
use that to plan your own example.
Yep.
I also think we could also, like after doing the example, non-example whole
Mhm.
class, we could just give them the checklist with those questions and they do it with their partners. Like first they just trade
Yeah.
and give feedback to another, and the last step would be revise my own or not. But
Yeah.
that could also be something we work into the rest of this week.
I think in that show call, similar to the transferable questions that you named for kids, you're gonna want to stamp a criteria for success that they have to include in their objective summary in order for it to be exemplar.
Yeah.
So I think that's another thing that we probably want to iron out
Yep.
It's a little
today,
checklist
that they
Here's
can
my summary.
do a self-check to make sure that they generated a high quality.
But that also gives you guys a check on like, are kids taking away the meaning of whatever chapters they read for homework,
Yeah.
or are they taking away like crazy random things that are just small
Details.
details?
Right.
Yeah.
So I would love for us to start with the transferable questions that good readers ask themselves to identify an objective summary, and then we'll identify or write our objective summary for chapter 25, and then stamp a criteria for success for kids.
Can we actually work in a different order?
I would love to.
Can we actually work up through what an objective summary has to have?
Okay.
And then we can create the questions to go into that to make sure we're hitting each part of that
Let's-
criteria.
Share this one note with me. So
I would
can
love-
type in it.
Yeah. You want to? Okay.
Yeah. Well, I figure I could just type the. We could also type the
Mhm.
question. Do you have the
No, I don't have this one
Maybe
yet
I should.
either.
Yay.
I had data meetings from last year. So if you don't know what I talked about on 315 of last year,
But
here's
I
this.
also have last year.
Assessment matrix report for WASP cold reading.
Oh, wasp.
Doing it on Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Yay, the fly girls.
So you have it.
Should be in your inbox.
I really wish it had coincided with our international release.
You know, I really do too.
I was so excited.
I bet for Katie it did. Because she's like,
Mm.
she's like poorly with ours.
Oh, it's
Not actually.
Okay, we're opening. Oh, wait, I would
open in one.
Yeah. You can
Do you
tell
have
Jake
this
if
too,
you open
man?
it.
Do you want this?
Can you just send me that one page?
Mm-hmm.
That way I'm not adding like a PDF OneNote.
Yes.
Fair. So I gotta start
You should
deleting
maybe
one of
have
those.
I just need to.
The OneNote just shut down.
I don't think any data they free from last year.
The OneNote is shutting down.
We'll have to work through the problem. There we go.
Okay. Alright. What's that?
Whoa, I just zoomed in a lot.
Can you tell me how to share just the page? Walk me through it.
Oh, go back. If you click on home, is there an email page? Yep, see it on the far right. Go over.
Who's gonna
Yeah.
put like an update for it?
Already did.
At the bottom?
You mean you don't want all of our OneNotes?
No. Sorry.
You don't want another one?
Well, I like titled it.
Bottom or the top?
I renamed it 315.
Oh, okay.
That way we
What is this?
everything.
Is all of this for 315?
Yeah.
Some of it.
This whole page is today. Okay, so criteria, like thinking about criteria for success. So I think the first thing to be successful with this is you have to have information from the entire text that you're reading.
Like beginning, middle, end.
Yeah.
Honestly, I wonder this like in some ways can directly connect to how they do like when they write main ideas in shared text. It's like contextualized at the beginning, middle, and end.
Right.
Like you include like the most important ideas of the text.
Right. So must include the most important ideas of the text.
There needs to be context, which would be like where and when, which is like so that's like situating the reader in the setting, where and when, and also I feel like key figures or like key people.
What about what it should not?
And then I think the last piece of that should be, it has to have, it should have objective language. So it can't have any sort of opinion language.
Yeah. So like should not be based on like feelings and emotions and personal opinions.
Yeah. And something I've also noted is that these kids, and it's interesting, last year's kids would do as well, is I sometimes make an inferential jump based on what I think is going to happen, and I add that into an objective summary. Even though it may not be explicitly said in the text, I'm going to assume it based on what I've already. So think about this question, if it didn't talk about people dying, but we said that, kids might think, oh, well, I'm naturally assuming that people are dying, even if it never said that in the text. Which is great, it's showing a level of inferential thinking, but not in an objective summary.
Right. Wrong place for it.
Wrong place, yeah. Oh, that's creepy.
Yes, sir.
How do one more?
Do you have a pass? Are you with Dr. Palmer?
Yes.
What's wrong with the water fountain?
Thank you.
You okay?
I don't like the water fountain, do
He just needs to stay in class. That's why he gets my water bottle.
Because he's always going out of class.
Yes. What else do we have for? Sorry, Ken.
No, go ahead.
We just have subjective language for what it shouldn't include.
And then I think details that are specific to one part of the text.
Do we want to
Or
put?
just irrelevant, like details that are just
Or
like,
irrelevant.
Like extrapolated from background knowledge.
Bigger picture.
One thing I'm trying to do is make sure the language that we use in our planning is student friendly as well. So should we break?
You can make a student one.
Yeah.
So, and I also think there should be multiple, and like this last part, like details that are specific to one part of the text. I'm gonna also put you should have multiple pieces of evidence to support whatever your objective summary is. Like you shouldn't just be pulling it from one part. You should be able to say oh, this is a summary, and here are all the different pieces of evidence to show that this is what it is.
I wonder
so
if we call them key details since we're trying to align summary with central idea.
Yeah, I think so.
I wonder if we just call them key details since that's something that they already have had practice pulling out.
Yeah.
Trying to keep the language consistent.
Yeah. So I'm gonna actually do this last part. It's the best I've ever seen one note work where multiple people are typing in.
Don't jinx it, Kevin.
Sorry, I couldn't help it. It's working so well.
That's why I'm not.
Yeah.
I see where my cursor is. I see what you guys are typing.
Do you want to put a number on it for kids, like 5 to 7 key details?
No, because I think depending on the length of the text, then I get caught up in that.
and then it becomes very formulaic as
Right.
opposed to like
Yeah.
authentic.
Yeah.
So for the criteria, has to have information or context from beginning, middle, and end, must include most important ideas of the text, must situate the reader, objective language, multiple pieces of evidence.
Mm-hmm.
Do we want to include anything else that should be in their objective summary? Especially, it might be helpful to look at the response that you guys named as an exemplar for them.
I think that's a good start. Like, I think that's, like, if we're hitting all 5 of those, I think we're going to be where we want to be.
Yeah. Why is this skill important for kids?
I think 2 things that I think about with this one is 1, they're able to just name what the text is about. I also think that when you ask kids to start thinking about objective summaries, I think what it forces them to naturally do is also think about the subjective nature of a text. And so not only are we able to pull out what the text is about when we're thinking objective and subjectively, we're able to also think about the bias that an author may have when writing it, which I'm also then starting to identify what is not objective,
Right.
which I think our kids don't always do.
It also roots their answers in the text.
100%.
When I think about, like, I know blank about POW camps or some other, like, domain knowledge, and I'm putting it in my writing, kind of naturally, this process has to force a person to think that's not relevant, it's not like,
Right.
specific to this textual excerpt that I'm summarizing.
Yeah. Which I think is a challenge of the domain, is doing domain based, is that then I'm trying to bring all of these other things, even though that's not what's physically on the paper, which is why I think this idea of like key details, evidence, is so important for kids.
And I think it helps them get to that subjective nature,
Yes.
which is what I think you said, like identifying the facts
Right.
will help you form your opinions, or
Right.
will help you make inferences about it.
And then identify when something is not objective.
One thing I'm wondering in terms of like forming this is, do we also want to include something that clues kids into either like transition words that are appropriate, or like I'm structuring it like my beginning, middle, end. Do I have like a concluding sentence about the, you know what I mean? Like with central idea, because we're thinking about it like central idea.
Mhm.
We've talked about, last week we talked about like, what is the purpose? Sometimes like purpose comes into central idea, or
But I think that's how you distinguish it. Is a summary is in your central idea, but a central idea may have a couple extra pieces, like what is the purpose, that will then be talking a little bit more about some of those things. And so summary is like a puzzle piece in the central idea that we're just asking you to pull out that piece of the central idea. That in the central idea, you're going to include a lot more context. You're going to include a lot more about author's perspective and purpose. But for now, we're pulling out that middle piece that is summary and putting it right here.
I think to Devin's question, something that will be, I think from a teacher perspective, this is super important because it's really hard to analyze the text if you don't get just like the gist of like what is this
What's happening? Yeah.
So this is like a do not pass go before we talk about author's craft and all of those other like super meaty standards. I think the other thing is like when you're rolling this out to kids and you're like debriefing the exemplar, it's like sharing with kids why is this so important for us to be able to do as readers. It's important because it helps us understand what the author is trying to communicate to us so that we can then analyze how they communicate.
Right. I think I
specific
think
to
that
analysis, which is the tendency.
Right.
which our kids actually are doing pretty well. Like they're getting to the analysis piece. We were talking the other day about how ironic it is that kids are missing the 7-2 questions and then nailing 7-5, 7-6, and 7-9. It's like, what the hell is happening? How is it? You don't understand the text, but you understand how it's being, how it's occurring.
Right. Now that we have our criteria for success, you had some feedback around the process. Do you want to get into the transferable questions that good readers ask themselves, or do you want to actually generate?
Because now I think it would be easier, now that I know what the criteria is, now I know what questions to drive you to this criteria.
Yeah. So what questions do good readers ask themselves?
So I think the first thing is like, what is this text about? And
Describing, Katie. Okay.
yeah, I'm gonna.
Good readers ask.
Good readers ask themselves like, what is this text mostly about? And within that, there is a question of like, what ideas, concepts, people are being introduced, and what happens to them over the course of this text.
Ideas, concepts of people.
Events, any of those things. Any of the
I think
things that are from.
ideas, because the standard was
Yeah.
people, events, ideas.
Yeah, you can think of that 7-3 standard, talks about impact, all those things.
People, events, and ideas are
Are introduced, discussed, described by the text. Because what I don't want to have them do is think that this is only something you do for an article that's short, or that you do at like the beginning. Because it's like, no, we're going to summarize chapter 25, but we know all of the key players, so we're introducing new events that are happening. We don't need to introduce Lily in the chapter 25 summary.
We can change this, but do we want something more skill based that is also like, if I'm looking at the title, or like what words in the title, tell me about the topic, or do we want to make it more like, how do I turn it into a question? So
I think so. I think so.
Like
If there is a title.
Like If
It's
there's
like-
yeah.
What
keyword?
so like what does the title tell me about
What this text
yeah,
is going to
it's
be
always
about.
creepy the
About the
text
topic,
words.
I would like
right.
the topic.
Yeah.
What does it tell
Yeah.
me about?
What is the topic and what am like what is the topic and what is the
And what do I
title?
think I'm going? And what do I think I'm going to learn about this topic? Because that's kind of what we've done in prep session is like
Yeah. Right.
make it give me background information, infer what you think this text is going to be about, and then turn the title into a question that you think the text is going to answer.
What else?
I think the next thing should be like, do I have multiple pieces of evidence to support my summary? Or can I pull multiple pieces of evidence from different parts of the text? Because I think like, if I'm looking at answer choice C on here, I can only find evidence from the beginning of this text. I can only find it from the first 2 paragraphs, and we read 15 paragraphs.
Yeah.
So I need to be asking like, can I find multiple pieces of evidence throughout the text?
Or what important details does the author use?
Right.
Mhm.
To support this summary.
Yeah.
I think either one of those.
Is this a good scaffolding question?
I feel like that's like a good question all the time, just knowing that like when you're thinking about like part A, part B, like they
Mhm.
always need to be thinking, do I have like does the most important evidence does the most important evidence in this text support what I'm trying to say? And or like do I have evidence to support what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. Katie, the only thing I would say about the text about how can it be broken into beginning,
like,
middle, and end, I would say like what is the structure of this text?
Okay.
Because if
That's
it's
what I was trying to
if
get
it's
at.
like cause and effect or problem solution, it's
Right.
not gonna have a beginning and an end, a beginning, middle, and end. It's gonna be more like introduction and then like solution.
The reason I say that is because if we're giving them the checklist of like key details from all parts of the text, beginning, middle, end, would we then
From the
change
most important
From the most important
section.
sections.
key
of the
details
text.
from the most important sections of the
Yeah.
text?
Because Unbroken is going to read more beginning, middle, and end because it's written like a narrative, but George Takei is not going to be written beginning, middle, and end.
Do you want to make it transferable?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so what is the structure of this text? And then
And then I think the last piece is like,
is there enough evidence from the most important parts?
I think the last thing is like, have I included any subjective language? If so,
Okay, do you want me to put I in these explicitly?
yeah,
Okay, so
because that's what you ask yourself.
Mm-hmm.
collected methods. Am I using any?
Is that Arjunus?
It is. You can tell they're starting to get warmer. Things are coming off the wall.
Yeah, when's that AC gonna be turned on?
That's a good question.
That's Cassie.
Did you get the
We get
fan
some
out
air
the window?
conditioning.
Get out of here. Should have stopped run the building.
Making sure we're watching to the end of the tape.
I'm definitely gonna timestamp that.
We're gonna skip over the next 18 seconds. And we gotta jump right back. Kid walked in.
So am I including any objective language? Am I eliminating any subjective?
And then am I eliminating any subjective language I included in here?
Because I don't think they include subjective within their writing. I think they just need to be able to identify it when they see it in other people's writing.
But what I also heard is they haven't really had a lot of opportunities to actually write summary statements.
No, they haven't. Other
It's
than
also just, like,
central ideas.
Evaluating, like, am I, especially when it comes to like topics that are just like get kids riled up.
Right.
They tend to incorporate their feelings a lot.
Right.
They, like, which is great.
Yeah.
You want to like purge that, but like when you're trying to summarize something.
I also think this could be really useful when we're answering like some of these bigger questions, like we did one the other day about like was Japan justified in attacking Pearl Harbor? And I think going and telling them like you can only use objective language here. Don't say they were
Right,
being
'cause they use
sneaky.
subjective.
Don't say because that is subjective language. You need to say that they like misled the United States by saying this and doing that.
You're right, because that definitely came out as subjective in the
Right,
way that they were
100%.
naturally speaking and writing.
Yeah, and so I think giving them meatier questions like that, where we tell them like, I want you to be subjective here, I actually want you to be objective here, and using more of that language when they're answering like other questions. Like even how is the bird described? How would you describe it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And making sure they're using objective language versus subjective language, or maybe saying, I want you to put subjective language here. Where is your evidence of subjective language? Just to give them at bats, putting both in.
And I think you guys started that work yesterday in evaluating that question.
Yeah,
I think to Katie's point, and what it sounds like you were just saying is just increasing the at-bats at
Yeah,
that. Having them
100%.
pull out that language and use that language
Yep.
when required.
Yep.
I added to number 4, is my evidence relevant? And then to 5, are my statements factual? Which we could put like
Yeah.
Which could be a reminder of like, oh no, that's an opinion. If I'm a kid, like, oh no, that's an opinion word. So we
Yeah.
can go back and.
Yeah.
Great. Let's get to. I don't. Well, what do you guys think? I think we're good here.
I feel good here.
What time you guys? What time is this
When Devin says it's
on?
When Devin dismisses us.
I feel like in the spirit of practice, because we've been talking about that, if one of you could like just like take, or both of you take like a
Like the
minute,
launch.
internalize that, and figure out like how would I deliver this to kids in a
Yeah.
clear, student-friendly way, but also a way that is authentic and grounding and like, understanding the text.
Yeah.
And if one of you can like model, that'd be great.
I'm ready. Whenever you
You're probably gonna roll out to focus lesson.
Yeah.
Ready?
Steps.
Yeah, ready.
Yeah.
Great.
Give me a stand, or you want to just
Yeah, go
Yeah.
all
Okay.
in. If you're gonna do
So
it.
this would be modeling the roll out of what good readers ask themselves, right?
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay. So we've got an exemplar here on the board. Go ahead and just take the next 30 seconds. Can I actually get somebody to read this exemplar out for me? Mary, can you read the exemplar for me, please? Thank you, Mary. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go through this, and while we're reading this, I'm going to be thinking to myself, I'm going to ask myself some questions to make sure that my summary has hit all of the parts that we said it needs to hit. So the first question I'm going to ask myself is, what is this text mainly about? Who are the people, the ideas, the concepts, the events from this chapter, and have I captured all of the most important ones? Go through and just underline where I've talked about some of those important people. Take 30 seconds with your partner. Go. All right, can I go ahead and get some hands? What did you underline from this text? Katie? Perfect. Devin? Fantastic. Okay, so now that we've underlined the most important parts, I want to go back and I want to think, like, what was the title of my chapter? Can anybody share the title of chapter 25? Cool. So we could have made a prediction before, because we've already read this, but like if we had made a prediction before, the title is called The Monster. Who do we think, or what do we think we're going to be introduced to in this chapter entitled The Monster? Katie? Thank you. And so while I'm reading this, I'm going to be trying to find examples of who the monster is, what the monster is, and why he is the monster, because I want to be including that within my summary. Can you just go through, anytime you see anything that talks about the monster, who he is, what he is, why he's the way he is, can you just also put a box around that for me, please? Go. Wonderful. What do we put a box around? Cool. And a lot of that's the same stuff that we underline, but we're seeing that we're still hitting the same points, and that's all coming from our title. The next thing I want us to be thinking about is the structure of the text. We're reading the novel, we know it's chronological, and so we want to be thinking beginning, middle, and end. So while you're reading this, I want you to go through, I want you to find if there's anything that we've added that's only from one page. If you can't find 2 or 3 pieces of evidence from 2 or 3 pages, I want you to cross it out. Take 30 seconds with your partner, see if there's anything that you can find. Go. Fantastic. Anything we need to cross out? Good. I think we need to cross out this sentence too, because I think this is only from the middle, and I don't think we have evidence from here. So yeah, I get rid of that sentence. Thank you. And then the last thing I want to really think about is, like, have I included any subjective language? Can I give some examples of some subjective words that I might use to describe the bird? Katie? Cool. Mary? Cool. Devin? Cool. All those are subjective. What again, when we're thinking subjective, I'm also thinking about what. Is it my what on the count of 3 is subjective? My 1, 2, 3? Opinion. Wonderful. So let's go through. Do we see any opinion words? I see one. Who can spot the one opinion word that I can find? Perfect. The word is worst. Let's go ahead and get rid of that because that's not part of an objective summary. What I want you to do now is I want you to look at yours. I want you to trade with your partner. I want you guys to take the next 3.5 minutes. I want you to follow the exact same steps for your partners. Underline, box, cross anything out that needs to be. Go. And see.
Great. Feedback, it was effective. When?
I know it was effective when you're using the pace quickly so that kids are building on their knowledge of the first step rather than spending too much time. And so to hear your pace.
I appreciated the varied response methods
Yes.
and giving all students the opportunity to engage in the thinking so that we can give them feedback and know before they get to the exit ticket if they're able to generate this summary.
Yeah, I think the questions are really clear, and like the language that you use is clearly aligned to like what you guys knocked out.
Next time tries.
I think I'm wondering, I was for a second lost just listening with crossing out, like what am I crossing out? I'm wondering if we could, if it's, sorry, I'm gonna sneeze. If it's chronological, we could put like maybe kids code like BME, oh I'm missing the M, so I need to add a piece of evidence into M.
Yeah, I think so.
Kind of thing.
Yeah,
I think that could even be used for aggressive monitoring too.
100%.
So it's like a clear coding system.
missing from the middle, missing from the
Yeah.
yeah.
Wondering I have to make it more more inquiry based as opposed to steps based.
Yeah.
Is like you start with like, okay, good readers create objective summaries because it helps us show our understanding of a text.
Yeah.
Great. Objective summaries include things such as da 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 da. We're gonna look at 2 examples. Like I wonder if you show them an exemplar and a non-exemplar side by side.
Yeah.
Have them turn and talk. How are they different? How are they similar? Which one's stronger and why?
Yeah.
And then debrief as a whole class with the criteria.
Yeah.
And I feel like they'll probably pull out the criteria themselves as opposed to you giving it all to them.
That's fun too. I like that. I think that's better. I think it provides more struggle, and I think it provides more student voice and ownership when they feel like they've pulled it out themselves. Because I think like putting the 2 side by side and like what is this one missing, like finding the gap.
And the only thing connected to the conversation that we had is that I wanted you to pull out for them or have them identify why this matters and articulate to them why it's important.
Perfect.
I can put the and
Either place.
Yeah.
Somewhere.
Yeah.
When are we teaching it?
Monday.
Monday.
We have an assessment on Tuesday, even though this is not on the assessment on Tuesday. I'm gonna throw a little extra exit ticket
We
on
can just
there.
throw a question. Just throw a question.
I want extra. You also answering
Feels
this.
me every time.
That's alright, I'm not genuine, so my computer hasn't been genuine.
Feels me every time.
That's what it says.
Thanks for modeling.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
Should get
Thanks for
that
letting me
for a
join.
while.
And then
Yeah.
we can just make like a half sheet that's the student facing checklist.
Yeah.
And just like also use it.
Yeah. That's what I'm going to create next year. I'm going to go through every standard and create a good reader's notch, just like we did for Unit 2.
And we can put it in
And
the
just,
middle.
and
of that
right in the
thing.
middle, because that's
Little
where the one for
Then
Unit
you're not
2 is.
doing it like